Okay, good day, everybody. I hope everyone's doing well. My name is Robert Scott, and I am the Business Development Manager for the Gauteng branch of the Muscular Dystrophy Foundation of South Africa. And with me today, I've got a very special gentleman by the name of Marinus Mans, who is affected with limb-girdle muscular dystrophy, and we're going to be doing an interview today. So to introduce Marinus to all of you, Marinus completed 3 legal degrees at the University of Pretoria between 1998 to 2002, namely a BLC, an LLB, and then an LLM in labor law. In 2001, he worked as a trade union official for a union, and in 2002, he was a junior legal advisor for government. In 2003, he was employed by the Financial Services Board, which is now the Financial Services Conduct Authority, where he worked as an analyst, legal advisor, secretary to the Board of Appeal, trustee, and principal officer of the FSB Pension Fund. And finally, a specialist analyst in the Insurance Compliance Department until he became permanently disabled in 2014 and was unable to work anymore. For the past 8 years, Marinus has been managing his limb-girdle muscular dystrophy, but also kept himself busy with music reviews and interviews. He's also the author of a science fiction novel and a passive investor on the stock market. Marinus, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Robert. It's good to see you.
You too. Marinus, if we can start, what I'd like to ask the first thing, how and when were you diagnosed?
Well, it's quite a long story, so I'm going to try and keep it short. But I was diagnosed in 1997, but with something completely different that I've got now. I was misdiagnosed with Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease. But I lived with that disease for 8 years. You know, I studied, I got a degree. I mean, got my degrees, and then I started working. And in 2005, when I got my second car, I was already working. I just went to a neurologist again and said that, well, I've got CMT. And so the neurologist said, no, you don't. You've got something different. And they diagnosed me with limb-girdle muscular dystrophy. And so in both cases, in 97 and 2005, they just did an EMG, which is I always get this wrong, electromyography.
Yes.
And they also did just a walk test. And, you know, well, by 2005, I couldn't walk anymore. So I was in a wheelchair, which is why the neurologist probably said it's not CMT. And
Yes.
so, yeah, and so there wasn't, at that stage, there were no gene therapy, genetic testing available. So the neurologist mentioned muscle biopsy tests. I wasn't interested. I was young. I was full of nonsense, and I was still okay in my upper body. So I didn't do that, and I just went on with my life. I went on with my career until 2010 when I started to get more issues with my upper body. So I went to a neurologist in 2013 again, got reconfirmed for limb-girdle muscular dystrophy. And then we tested for Pompe disease. That was negative. So we knew I've got LGMD. And so I was with that neurologist until 2014. I was boarded or stopped working. But the more accurate diagnosis that I got was in 2017 when I met Eric Anderson. He's on your board as well, good friend of mine. And he sort of, you know, he coached me in genetics and why it's important to get genetically tested. And I went to a lady by the name of, if I can remember correctly, it was Sarita Erasmus. She was still active in South Africa.
Yes.
I got counseling. I got my actual phenotype diagnosis, which is 2B.
Yes. Sarita was actually also a member of our board at one point.
Oh yes. Okay.
I knew Sarita very well.
Yeah.
Right. Can you tell us more about your specific progression?
Yeah. It's also, I have to go back, and I'm also going to try and do it, without being too long-winded about it. In hindsight, I actually got, when I was in primary school, I was a great athlete. I was 4th or 3rd in Northern Transvaal, as it called back then, in high jump. We won relay championships, came first. And then in my first year of high school, I just lost all that. And we didn't know
Yeah.
why. Just to some people, they would say you burnt out, or you just don't have that ability more, or it's something to do with your growth process. But so I realized through high school there was something wrong. My last rugby game was was a cheese and wine rugby game, but it was difficult.
Yeah.
They put the biggest center against me from Boys High. He looked 32, and they hurt me, man. It's like, and I was playing this game while I realized that I don't have that speed anymore.
Yes.
So in my first year, I would say I also realized that when we played touch rugby, they called me the snail. So in 1996 was like the Rubicon for me. We went
Yes.
on holiday and we walked up a hill. I think it was a hiking trail, and I realized there's something seriously wrong. So that next
Yes.
year in 1997, a friend of mine said, "No, man, just train with me. I'm training for the August. Let's go to the gym." And I did something that was, not advisable for anyone now. And I gymmed with him, and I went through that whole process. So I think what happened then was the I don't know what you call them. It's not the physiotherapists, biokineticists. They picked up on it,
Yes.
and they saw something's wrong, and they sent me to the neurologist that I was talking about in 1997. But I mean,
Yes.
if the quickest way to show people how it progresses is I started off walking funny, started off struggling to get um, upstairs. Then you walk with one kitty. I had this
Yeah.
cane that you can unscrew with a knife inside that I used, this cool thing that I used
Yeah.
when I was a student. I had that thing, and then one crutch, and then 2003 it became two crutches. 2004 I had the electric wheelchair. 2005 I got the manual chair. I had to adapt my car again, because in 2003 I adapted my car for the first time. 2005 I adapted it again.
Yeah.
And then I had this combination of my SUV and my manual wheelchair for many years, until about 2019, when it was time to adapt again and get a new car and an electric power chair. So I think
Yes.
and then also in 2010, it was more my upper body that gave me issues. Where at work, the reason why I had to stop working is because my endurance became a problem, in terms of my breathing and my muscles around my lungs. And I had, you can just imagine sitting upright in the position that I was, sitting upright all the time, in boardrooms, talking a lot every day.
Yes.
Uh, I had serious muscle spasms. I had serious breathing difficulties. At some point, you get into a boardroom, I remember, and I'd overworked my muscles because we had to fly to Cape Town. And when I got in the boardroom at the specific institution, I struggled to breathe.
Yeah.
And it's all because of the stressors that have an impact on your muscles that are affected. Now, something that I haven't talked about with limb-girdle is it affects what it affects. It affects your limbs. It affects your arms and your legs, so that you can't walk anymore eventually. But it also affects the muscles, in your upper body, that for instance, I've got back muscles, but the muscles, my neck muscles aren't there anymore. My stomach
Yes.
muscles are very weak. The muscles that move my lungs are very weak. But so in terms of progression, where I am now in my upper body is that I'm just at that point where I'm not breathing normal 100%.
Yeah.
Um, I'm just below normal, and so I have to be monitored closely, because as I said, when those stresses come, anxiety, stress, overworking working for long periods of time and doing it and trying to keep up with able-bodied persons is difficult when they've
Yes,
got.
I can imagine.
Yes, I mean, you've worked with persons living with neuromuscular diseases for a very long time, so you know.
Yes, I have.
you've seen it, how it affects people. So I mean, I
Yeah.
think that's where I am in the progression. I know that from the data overseas, um, it's like a 50-50 thing with 2B. You never know where it's going to go, but it's very slowly progressive because it's a dysferlinopathy. So
Yes.
I am grateful that it's so slowly progressive. Um, but I also have to be careful. It's this balancing act constantly that I have to watch in terms of the progression, that I don't do things too much, but that I don't sit and become totally passive.
Yeah, a
Um,
very fine line that you have to go along.
that's true.
I mean, I know for myself as well. I mean, as you said, I've worked with people affected with neuromuscular disorders for quite a few years now, and I know it was quite an eye opener for myself. I mean, when I first started working here, the people that I was working with as well, I there were certain things that I took for granted. Picking up a cell phone, washing a plate and putting it in the drying rack. And as time went on, I realized that things that seem so easy for me, for someone affected with a neuromuscular disorder, it's really not that easy at all. So I can definitely understand how you've experienced your progression as well, and the challenges that you must face going along with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's you have to manage your energy. It's like you have to become
Yes.
this expert at managing your energy, because things like just switching lights on in your
Hmm.
house. I've got Wi-Fi lights now because that takes energy out of your day,
Yeah.
and you have to. So just an example.
You sort of need to preserve everywhere you can. Every
Yes,
little small thing you do, you have to be careful how you do it, when you do it, how often you do it.
yeah,
Sure,
that's true.
quite a challenge, I can imagine. Marinus, then if I can ask you, how has limb-girdle muscular dystrophy impacted on the different aspects of your life? For example, your work, your relaxation, relationships with people, friends. If you can give us some insight into that.
I would say I was lucky in terms of family and friends. You know, my family was very supportive. I just this morning I thought I remembered my parents told me that I can stay in the house for as long as possible, eat their food for as long as possible, but I have to build a career and go hunt for myself. They
Yes,
made that very clear. And I did that. You know, I had the support and I had their assistance throughout my student years, and I could do things like, you know, buy property but still stay at my house and rent it out so that I can prepare myself for adulthood.
yes,
So yeah, so family, my sisters and my brother-in-laws, they were all great examples for me. People who have achieved in life, and they assisted me throughout. And I even went overseas to visit my sister, my brother-in-law. So they were always there, to assist me. And I had friends that I know that I've known before I became symptomatic. So I don't see my friends every weekend these days, but they're always there if I need to talk. So I've got a good support structure, and I made new friends along the. So I'm not that that has not been difficult. I'm still single, so I'm not sure if I can't blame the disease for all of that. I'm an independent person. I still live on my own, even though
yeah.
many people in my shoes would have needed assistance. I make plans. I'm extremely independent. I'm a bit eccentric as well. So maybe the combination of that is why I'm still single. But I'm always looking. But then, but at some point, I was a workaholic, and I just I worked too much maybe, and I loved and
Yeah,
I worked hard to get where I was in that on that specific level of my career. But unfortunately, I had to say goodbye to that. So that was hard for me.
yeah,
So that was a difficult one, because now you have to take yourself out of that, um, the way in which you view yourself as a
yes,
successful person. Now suddenly you can't do that anymore, and you can't go and do something that's like just an admin position. I mean, even an admin position is very difficult for persons with these
yes,
kinds of diseases. So that was the work situation was difficult. Socially, I try. I went on holiday in December, but I have to take a caregiver with me now. So over the
yes.
years, I didn't have a problem with that, but I always needed that extra assistance, and I couldn't do all of the things. I couldn't do everything. I loved going to music shows. And now with COVID, I am very reluctant to actually go to music shows where there's lots of people because of
Yes.
the danger of getting pneumonia or something like that.
Yeah.
Or even though I do believe I'm still 100%. Before COVID, I didn't have a problem with that, but now with COVID, there's an added worry to it, isn't it?
Yeah. There's that additional level of concern.
Yes, yes. So I will still do that. I'll cross that bridge when I get there, but I'm very cautious.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, no, my cars are adapted. I have an adapted combi, VW combi, that I learned to drive with a lift. So I've got a bath lift. I am going to do my whole bathroom over. I'm in the process now of looking for building material and things like that, getting the contractor involved now. So next week we're going to start with all of that. So my whole house is going to be full of dust. Yeah. So yeah.
An interesting saying I heard recently where, and I think it could sort of apply to you as well, is that they say that the one thing in everybody's lives that's always constant is the fact that things are always going to change. And they say sort of as your circumstances change, you can look at your life like a TV series. They say that you keep on going into a new season. There's new
Yes.
characters, there's new changes, new things to deal with. So I think you're quite far along in your series as well, as far as all the changes you've
Oh
experienced.
yes, yes. And you have to continuously do that.
Yeah.
You have to continuously
You
do that.
adapt as you go. I
Yes.
found one thing that you said quite interesting as well, where you were talking about potentially falling ill or getting something like pneumonia. Through all the people that I've worked around who have neuromuscular diseases as well, I mean, I found as well that something like them catching the flu was actually a far bigger deal than it was for someone who doesn't have a
Yeah.
neuromuscular disorder, because I saw them try to get over it to the point where some of us would go and see our doctor, we get some medicine at the pharmacy, and we're okay in a few days,
Yeah.
where someone with a neuromuscular disorder, they would fall ill and it would take them 2 to 3 weeks to get better, combined with physiotherapy visits, and it was actually quite an ordeal for them to get sick. So I'm sure potentially falling ill by being around large crowds is definitely a
Yeah.
concern for someone in your position.
Yes, I had COVID and I was ill last year with the flu and it wasn't that bad. I mean, COVID is always bad. COVID was
Yeah.
I mean it was not as bad as I expected.
Yes.
Because it wasn't in my lungs. But the flu, I mean, I had serious fever and muscle aches and all those things. But
Yes.
I'm at that stage where I'm on the edge, right? So you don't know what's going to happen. It can go either
Yeah.
way. So I don't
You're on
want to
that
take,
fine line.
yeah, I don't want to take chances. So,
Yeah.
but you always have to be careful, and I'm very careful in spraying and making sure that it doesn't get to my lungs. I'm always trying to avoid
Yes.
it getting to my lungs because in my case, I think I'm still fine. I'll be able to get over it, but you never know what kind of there's COVID is very unpredictable. So I'm more worried
Yes.
about COVID, and then if I get something like pneumonia, but I've got on all my shots. I had so many shots from the Prevnar 13 to the COVID shots to the influenza shots. It's a good idea to get them.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Marinus, can I ask you, with your limb-girdle muscular dystrophy, what kinds of treatments are available to sort of alleviate the effects that you experience?
There's no treatment at this point in time. I mean, in the sense of there's no, you know, magic bullet or silver bullet. There's no injection that they can give you. There's no medicine that they can give you to cure it, to reverse it. There's no operation they can give that you can do to reverse it. But I mean, obviously you can get pain medication, and you can do operations for deformities and all those things.
Yes.
And some neuromuscular diseases have treatments, but in my case, there's none. So we're all waiting for the gene therapy replacement. They all fall along with the research, but it's going to be a long process to get that 100% safe and approved. For me, what worked the best is physiotherapy. I've always had exercises and did exercises. Even when I didn't go for it formally, I used um, um, a towel, just a towel, and I sort of emulated what I did in the gym with a towel. And this is
Yes.
a very cheap way of doing it, right? You can just sit in your wheelchair and exercise. But
Yeah.
then I did something called I Chi, which is Tai Chi in water. And so it's
Okay.
just yeah, it's just movements in water like you would do with Tai Chi, but you stand immersed in water and you hold on to something and you just do those movements.
Okay.
It's a bit difficult for me to do that now because it's difficult. I could do that on my own and transfer onto the lift, pool lift that's next to the wheel to my pool. So I could do that, but now it's getting a bit difficult. So I need assistance. So I'm not doing that often anymore. So physiotherapy is the best way for me to stay active, to keep my muscles going, to be to she stretches me, and we do exercises. I keep my heart rate going. That's the best exercise I can recommend. Um, but there's also from on the pulmonology side, there's a device called a Power Breathe. I have a box here for some reason. I don't want to advertise. They should pay me if I advertise. But it's this. I don't know if you can see it. My hands on it.
Yes, we can.
There we go. It's
Okay.
just this. You just use it. It's an inspiratory device. So it's you inhale against resistance, and then you exhale, and you just do those exercises. It has to be prescribed by a pulmonologist, and then I use it. So I use it intermittently between my physiotherapy. So that keeps
Yes.
me. And also you have to be careful that you don't overdo it because in the beginning I did too much of it, and I could feel that it impacted my upper body, and I had to
Yes.
tone it down a bit. But once you
Yeah.
find balance again, so those are the things that I do, and you have to do it consistently. But remember,
Yes.
I have a dysphilonopathy. It's one of the very slow ones, so it might be different for persons with a dystrophy, which is the Duchenne's and Duchenne muscular dystrophy and some of the other limb girdles. But mine
Yes.
is different. So yeah, I think that is for me. And of course I use Voltaren a lot.
Yeah.
I don't do pain medicines. For me, I'm lucky that I don't have extreme pain, but I do Voltaren. So the Voltaren that helps me for the muscle spasms and those things that are, I would say, quite mild in my case. But if I overwork it, like I did when I was working, it becomes serious.
Yes.
It becomes acute, and I am
Back to
serious.
that fine line you were talking about.
Yes,
Anything you overdo is going to get you.
exactly.
I must say, as far as the physiotherapy goes, I actually noticed as well through the years as well that physiotherapy seems to be the one thing that helps a lot. I think for most of the dystrophies as well, just to keep the muscles supple, keep you moving. We have seen sometimes the effects that certain people have had when they haven't done physiotherapy in a long time, and it definitely shows that physiotherapy seems to help. Obviously, but like you said, case by case is different, but it seems like a lot of people do get a lot of benefit out of
Oh yes,
physiotherapy in itself.
oh yes, no, definitely. It's both preventative and it's in the short term and in the long term. It helps you in the short term and in the long term because in
Yes,
the long term it prevents you from deteriorating quicker or faster. And in the short term, it helps you to avoid those muscle spasms and those things that
yes,
hurt that's uncomfortable. And then and it yeah, and if you stop doing it, I've just recently I had a problem with my medical aid, and they I'm still trying to get them to approve it. Um, which is a long story. Don't have time for me. Maybe some other day we can talk about that. But when I stopped for a week, I could feel it. I could feel it.
yes.
I
See,
was
to feel it, the fact that you could feel it that quickly just goes to show you. I mean, if you do it regularly, it's going to help you. But I think even like you find some people, they gym their whole lives, and then all of a sudden, for a couple of weeks, they stop gymming, and they say they can feel it almost immediately. They start feeling the effects of not going, and
my physiotherapist is my personal trainer.
keeps the six pack.
Well, I wish.
Myself as well.
Yeah.
Marinus, can I ask you, how do you deal with the daily challenges that it brings? Do you have any advice for other people who are suffering from muscular dystrophy? So what keeps you going? What keeps you positive?
I had to think about, because I knew you were going to ask this question. I had to think about it. And there's three aspects that I think is important. That there are many aspects and many things I use to keep me positive and motivated. Because you have to be motivated. This is a hobby that's
Yeah,
very, very, very engrossing, very expensive, and you have to do it the right way. And I've learned from experience. So I've got 25 years of experience with this. The first thing I was very the thing that sort of started me on this journey in the beginning to get me more positive, I think, was a gentleman by the name of Stephen R. Covey. Wrote a couple of books called Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, The Eighth Habit, The Third Alternative. I've read all those books. And he borrowed a little bit from Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl was an Austrian um, psychiatrist that was in a concentration camp in the Nazi Germany. So you can imagine that the most difficult thing that you can experience in life would have been being in a concentration camp in Nazi
yeah,
Germany, and you're Jewish and you're a prisoner. And he had this thing that where um, he talked about finding meaning in very, very, in situations that are hopeless. And for me, I never read a book from that Viktor Frankl authored, but Stephen Covey took his ideas and made it very simple. So he was talking about this thing called, if something happens to, if let me just remember, there's a in between stimulus and response, there's a space. That just means when something happens to you, you have a choice. You have freedom of choice how to deal with that in basic
mhm,
terms. I don't think people understand how powerful that is, because you can be from whatever religion, whatever whatever nationality, whatever sexuality, whatever gender. Everyone has that choice to choose things when a certain way of thinking, a certain way of going in a direction when something happens to you. A good example is when old Will Smith clapped Chris Rock the other day at the Academy Awards, right? Something happened to Chris Rock. Now, whether I'm not going to comment on the on each side, I'm just saying he hit him. He had a choice to deal with it in a certain way, and we all know how he dealt with it, right?
yes,
So he could have hit him back, or he could have freaked out and walked off the stage, but he dealt with it in a certain way. So now
yes,
every one of us have that choice. And if you have a disability, you're going to have to make that choice every day of your life. And that's the first thing. I think that powerful understanding that the choices you make are very powerful every day. The
yes,
second thing is that something that I've learned over the years is that you should focus on what you can do and not focus on the things you can't do.
yes,
Don't compete with others who are not disabled or not in your position, or can do things that you can't do, because you're going to be a very unhappy person.
yeah,
Rather find ways to get around your limitations, and then focus on the things that you can do, and then do it well and enjoy it. Enjoy it. That's
yes,
that's number two. And then the third one that I think is important. I didn't have a word for this. I only got a word for it last week when I interviewed my editor, and we were talking about characters in novels that are interesting, and she was talking about failing forward. So the characters that she likes, Noreen, her name is Noreen. She likes, and she got it from one of her friends. I don't know where she got it from, but it just clicked, and I went like, that's what we do. We fail forward, and so you have to become this expert when you have this disease these
Yes.
slow diseases. You have to become this expert at failing forward because you're going to fail. And it's not your fault. It's the disease. Like the first time I couldn't get upstairs, I took the elevator. The first time I couldn't walk anymore, started using a crutch. First time I realized I can't use these crutches anymore. I got a wheelchair. And I decided that I need
Yes.
a wheelchair now. Or a walker. You need a walker perhaps. Or the first time I couldn't drive in a certain way, I adapted my car, failing forward.
Yeah.
So that's good. When I was working, I had to find other ways. I was lying in my bed after I was bored and thinking, what am I going to do with my life now? But I found hobbies and I'm volunteering. So I'm doing all these things within my limitations, but I'm failing forward. And I think those
Yes.
two things are I'm sure if I sit and think around, there's lots of stuff that I could come up with. But those three things are, for me, the most important things. Yeah.
Marinus, I love the way you said that. I think it's important for people to always remember that your decisions are yours. You will always have your decisions. It's yours to make, and how you do approach your life is always going to be completely up to you. I think what I found most amazing in speaking with you is no matter how many hurdles you came across through the progression of your disease and various aspects in your life, you always knew that you had to keep on, as you said, failing forward, in that you were always going to reach a point where there was something you couldn't do or something you were going to struggle with. But you made the conscious decision to make a choice to make it better for yourself. And I think
Yeah.
the fact that you've stayed positive through everything, I think, is quite amazing as well. I think a lot of people may struggle to stay positive, but I hope through people watching your story and hearing what you've had to say, I hope that they find some light in that and are able to see that if I do things the right way, if I maybe just change my mindset or my approach towards things, that maybe it might make things a bit easier. While a neuromuscular disorder, I think, is always going to be something very difficult for somebody to deal with. It's always going to be your choice as to how you deal with it. And I think the power of thought and the power of your own decisions can make a world of difference if applied the right way.
Yes, absolutely. And then look for role models. I've had quite a few role models, disabled and non-disabled, who taught me the skill I think that I've got. I've always had this thing. I remember when I'm down and out and I'm lying there, and there's no hope. I've always
Yeah.
had the skill to get up again. Like, okay, I I have to do something, even if it's small, even if it's tiny. I don't do the things I used to, but I can do this. And look for role models because I've had people. For instance, I didn't know I could fly at some point, and then I met someone in a wheelchair that told me, "Look, no, you can fly. This is how you do it.
Yeah.
It's this basic thing." And like, oh, okay, I can fly. And I was in my 20s already. It's like I
Yeah.
thought I was just. It's not going to be, and so you look for those people, and there are plenty of them, and they don't have to be disabled or in your
Yes.
situation. They can teach you a lot. So you can't do it alone as well. You need help.
Definitely.
You can be independent. That's fine. I know I'm very independent and I'm stubborn and I'm hard-headed. But when I need help, I ask for it. You know.
Yes. So I think there's also that aspect of at some point you are going to need to put your pride in your pocket and just
Yes,
ask someone for help. And I think that's a very difficult. I know that's a very difficult thing for me to do. So I can only imagine sometimes you got to bite the bullet and say, okay, I do need help now. And
that's
I
it.
think that an important thing for people to know is there always is help. All you need to do is ask.
That's it. Yeah. If someone says no, you ask someone else. Yeah.
Exactly. The worst thing someone could say is no,
Yeah.
but you won't know unless you ask.
Yeah. And
So,
I found that it's very rare that when I ask for advice, advice as well, advice and help, people are always willing to give it. So yeah, don't be shy.
100%.
Don't be shy.
Yeah. That's the thing that takes a lot out of people. Once it's weird, it's quite strange. It takes a lot to get you over the initial shyness, but once you're over it, you realize if I'd gotten over this quite some time ago, things would have been easier. But it's just
Absolutely.
that hurdle of getting over it sometimes.
Absolutely.
Marinus, thank you so very much for doing this with us today. It was lovely to talk to you again.
Thanks. Thank
And
you.
please, good luck with everything that you're doing, and we will chat again soon.
Yeah, thank you so much. Take it
Thank you,
easy.
Marinus.
Good luck.
You too.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.